From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. Radio Pilipinas World Service can also be heard on shortwave broadcast through the shortwave facilities of the United States Agency for Global Media or Voice of America on the following shortwave frequencies: 12.020 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.665 MHz. I'm your host, Leo Magpayo, and this is Dateline Malacañang. Malacañang on Sunday said the investigation into alleged multi-billion peso corruption in flood control projects isn't stopping, despite the fact that the Independent Commission for Infrastructure, or ICI, is about to close shop. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro made the assurance after critics, including Representative Leila de Lima and the Akbayan Party, slammed the decision to wind down the ICI. Castro explained that the commission has already finished its work and handed its findings to the Ombudsman, which is now handling the next phase of the probe. She emphasized that the end of the ICI doesn't mean the investigation is over, noting that both the Ombudsman and the Department of Justice, or DOJ, are still conducting their own preliminary inquiries and can even open new ones if needed. The ICI was created late last year to look into alleged irregularities in flood control projects worth billions. It's set to operate only until March 31st as it wraps up its mandate. Philippine National Police, or PNP Chief General Jose Melencio Nartates Jr. also said the police will continue helping authorities to go after individuals involved in questionable infrastructure projects. Several PNP units, including Engineering, Criminal Investigation Detection Group, or CIDG, Forensics, and Information Technology, were among those that assisted the ICI.
Dateline Malacañang.
342 Filipinos are back home after arriving in Manila early Sunday aboard the government's second chartered repatriation flight from the Middle East. The Philippine Airlines flight landed at Ninoy Aquino International Airport, or NAIA Terminal 1, around 7 in the morning, where Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW Secretary Hans Leo Cacrac, Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA Administrator Patricia Yvonne Kaunan, Department of Health, or DOH Undersecretary Gloria Balboa, and other government agency officials were on hand to welcome them. Most of the returnees, 328 of them, are overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs. They were immediately given help, including temporary hotel stays, medical checks, food and transportation back to their provinces. They also received financial assistance from the government. This chartered flight is part of the government's push to speed up evacuation efforts for Filipinos affected by the ongoing tensions in the Middle East. The group came from several areas, including Al Khobar, Dammam, and Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, as well as Bahrain, and had to travel by land across borders before boarding the flight home. Officials said coordination with host governments and international partners is ongoing to make sure Filipinos who want to return can do so safely. In a press briefing, Cacrac said since day one, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. directed a whole-of-government approach in helping OFWs as well as Filipinos stranded in the Middle East.
Of course, this is a Philippine government funded flight with 343 passengers and most notably 328 OFWs and 13 children, OFW children. And this of course, is under the auspices of the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration Emergency Fund. And again, we will just have USEC Admin PY explain the details later. Laking pasasalamat po natin that they landed safely, and once again the government, the whole of government team directed by the President since day one. Actually, if you go back to October 7th, nung nagkaroon ng Hamas-Israel conflict, October 7, 2023. Since day one, pinulong na kami ng ating Pangulo at inatasan na ang whole of government agencies. So, DMW, OWA, DOH, DSWD, TESDA, DOTR, DFA, mobilized para sa kapakanan ng ating mga mahal na returning OFWs. Kaya nandito si Undersecretary Global, Undersecretary Global BOA ng OWA, ng DPWA, DOH to represent SecTed Herbosa. And then of course, ang Angels in Red nasa sa loob, kasama namin pa rin yung team ni Sec Rex Gatchalian sa DSWD. So patuloy lang yung effort na ito, and I hope you appreciate the many areas in which we move. There are a lot of, when it comes to emergency responses ng DMW OWA, there are a lot of moving parts, no? So one would be yung, since day one, kami ni Admin PY, yung mga stranded OFWs hindi makaalis dito, o kaya stranded dun sa transit hubs all around the world, Hong Kong, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, umabot pa nga ng Africa. At hindi lang yun, may bagong larangan na, yung, hindi naman bago, pero yung isa pang larangan na ginagalawan natin, yung mga OFW sa Middle East, sa GCC, let's say, na nagbakasyon, tiyempong bakasyon, halimbawa sa OFWs in Kuwait, tiyempong National Day. So they took that opportunity to take a vacation around the time pumutok itong currency galot natin noong Feb 28. So Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia, in many parts of the world, meron pa rin kaming tinutulungan in partnership with the DFA ko. Sectes Lazaro, I need to mention, and her ambassadors on the ground. Napakaganda, napakataas ng koordinasyon. Kami inatasan ni Pangulo, kami ni Sectes since day one, no? Feb 28.
House Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Leo Magpayo.
Dateline Malacañang.
Earlier, 442 Filipinos arrived in Manila on Saturday after the Philippine government flew them out of the United Arab Emirates on a chartered repatriation flight. The flight from Fujairah touched down at Ninoy Aquino International Airport or NAIA Terminal 3 just after noon. Of the group, 200 are overseas Filipino workers or OFWs, 60 are their family members, and 182 were stranded because flights in the region were disrupted by the ongoing Middle East conflict. Department of Migrant Workers or DMW Secretary Hans Leo Magpayo said this is the first government-chartered flight since the crisis escalated, pushing the total number of Filipinos brought home to nearly 1,000. He added that the government is now working to connect the returnees to jobs, livelihood programs, and retraining opportunities. Magpayo, who flew with the group, also shared that he saw firsthand how UAE authorities were protecting both their citizens and foreign workers. Among those who returned were Romel and Roda Maninang, stranded since March 1st. They said the government's quick response made a difficult situation easier to bear. They were immediately given assistance upon arrival, and agencies like the Department of Health or DOH and Department of Social Welfare and Development or DSWD will continue providing medical and psychosocial support, especially for those who need it most. Meanwhile, the UAE continues to fend off Iranian missile and drone attacks. Officials there report hundreds of projectiles intercepted and several casualties and injuries among different nationalities, including one Filipino.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, on Saturday said the Philippine government will provide necessary aid to the family of Mary Ann De Vera, the Filipino national killed during an Iranian strike while on her way to shelter in Israel. De Vera's remains arrived in Manila on Saturday morning. DMW Secretary Hans Leo Magpayo said the government, since receiving the report of De Vera's demise, had coordinated possible assistance to her family in Pangasinan province. De Vera's remains were received by her husband, Bernie Lavarias, along with other Filipino officials and Israeli ambassador to the Philippines, Dana Kirsch. During a press briefing at Ninoy Aquino International Airport, or NAIA Terminal 3 in Pasay City, Kakdak extended his appreciation to the State of Israel for facilitating the repatriation of the remains of overseas Filipino worker Mary Ann. Kakdak added that President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. also ordered them to coordinate with the Israeli side, like Ambassador Dana Kirsch and Philippine Ambassador in Tel Aviv, Ambassador Eileen Menjola Rao. Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA Chief Patricia Yvonne Kaunan, said they will personally visit her relatives in Pangasinan on Monday.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. over the weekend said the Philippines and Singapore are gearing up to work more closely together, especially in trade, investments, and fast-growing sectors like artificial intelligence or AI and clean energy. The President shared the update after meeting with Singapore's Deputy Prime Minister and Trade Minister Gan Kim Yong at Malacañang. In a Facebook post, President Marcos said their discussion focused on how both countries can expand economic cooperation and tap into new industries that could open more opportunities for Filipino workers and businesses. The chief executive added that strengthening ties with Singapore is important as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, pushes for deeper economic integration. President Marcos said closer collaboration will help the Philippines stay competitive, support sustainable growth, and prepare the country for industries of the future.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. said the Philippines is staying the course on reforms and sound economic policies to keep the economy stable despite global uncertainties. The President shared the update after meeting with International Monetary Fund, or IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, where they talked about the country's economic outlook and the reforms meant to keep growth steady. President Marcos said working closely with partners like the IMF helps support the country's long-term economic goals. The chief executive also noted that the discussion touched on the Philippines' priorities as it prepares to chair the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, stressing that discipline, structural reforms, and strong international partnerships will make the economy more resilient. In an interview, Georgieva said the IMF expects the Philippines to grow faster than the regional average this year, pointing to reforms that could unlock stronger long-term performance.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang on Saturday said the Philippines will cooperate with the United States as Washington investigates whether Manila has been enforcing rules against importing goods made with forced labor. The announcement came after the U.S. Trade Representative, or USTR, opened a broad probe covering the Philippines and nearly 60 other countries. The goal is to find out whether these governments are doing enough to block products linked to forced labor, something the U.S. says could give offending companies an unfair cost advantage. Trade Secretary Cristina Roque, through Palace Press Officer Claire Castro, said the Philippines is taking note of the investigation and will take part in the process to address U.S. concerns. The probe includes major economies like Japan, South Korea, Australia, Canada, and the European Union, as well as several Southeast Asian neighbors. Under U.S. law, the USTR can impose tariffs or other trade measures if it finds violations. For now, Washington has asked all the countries involved to begin official consultations.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news, the Philippine National Police, or PNP, is now monitoring gasoline stations that have suddenly stopped operations amid suspicions of hoarding and other illegal practices. The Department of Energy, or DOE, earlier sought PNP assistance in going after fuel retailers that may be taking advantage of tensions in the Middle East. This comes after netizens reported unannounced closures of several gas stations and urged the national government to investigate possible hoarding and price manipulation. PNP Chief General Jose Melencio Nartatis Jr. said they understand the challenges faced by fuel station owners, but warned that any shutdown linked to illegal activity will prompt immediate police action. He has directed police chiefs nationwide to coordinate with local governments and the DOE to determine the reasons behind the abrupt closures. Nartatis said the PNP has intensified its monitoring efforts in line with President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s directive to prevent hoarding and profiteering amid the global oil crisis. Help desks have also been set up nationwide to make it easier for the public to report fuel-related concerns. The PNP chief assured motorists that contingency measures are in place to maintain peace and order despite rising fuel prices and the impact of the conflict in Iran.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives is set to approve this week a measure granting Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. the authority to temporarily cut or suspend excise taxes on petroleum products. House Bill, or HB number 8418, which the President certified as urgent, includes strict conditions and time limits to allow government to deliver immediate relief during oil price shocks without waiting for new legislation. House Majority Leader Sandro Marcos said the bill was crafted for situations where overseas crises quickly translate into higher pump prices, increased transport fares, and rising costs of basic goods. He and Speaker Boji D pushed the measure as part of efforts to keep government prepared for price spikes driven by global disruptions, including conflict-related volatility in oil supply. Under current law, excise taxes form part of the retail price of fuel. meaning any increase cascades into transportation, delivery, electricity generation, and the cost of goods in markets and stores. HB 8418 authorizes the President, upon recommendation of the Development Budget Coordination Committee and in coordination with the Energy Secretary, to suspend or reduce fuel excise taxes under specific conditions. One trigger is when the average Dubai crude price reaches or exceeds $80 per barrel for a month, capturing sustained price pressure rather than short-term fluctuations. Another trigger applies when a state of national emergency or calamity is declared and domestic pump prices rise extraordinarily as certified by the Energy Secretary. The suspension or reduction may apply only to selected petroleum products and may be implemented either fully or partially, depending on the situation. To prevent abuse, the measure limits any suspension or reduction to a maximum of 6 months, extendable or terminable only by Congress. The total allowable period cannot exceed 1 calendar year. The authority itself is time-bound and may be exercised only until December 31st, 2028. The bill also requires the President, through the Finance Secretary, to submit a report to Congress within 15 days of issuing an order and every month thereafter, detailing the basis for the action, estimated revenue loss, and expected effects on inflation and fuel prices. The Department of Finance, Department of Budget and Management, Department of Economy, Planning and Development, Department of Energy, and Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, in coordination with the Bureau of Internal Revenue and Bureau of Customs, are mandated to issue implementing rules within 15 days of the law's effectivity.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, Solid North Party List Representative Ching Bernos is backing the possible revival of the government's Libreng Sakay program as commuters brace for a looming fare hike driven by rising oil prices. Acting Transportation Secretary Giovanni Lopez earlier said he has directed road sector officials to tap the 1 billion peso allocation under the 2026 national budget for the service contracting program, which allows the government to contract transport cooperatives and operators to provide services. Berno said restoring Libreng Sakay would offer much-needed relief to vulnerable groups, including students and daily wage earners. She added that during crisis, government must cushion the impact on ordinary Filipinos. Bernos also urged the Department of Transportation to study expanding Libreng Sakay beyond the EDSA busway so more commuters can benefit. She encouraged well-resourced local governments to explore service contracting arrangements with their own transport providers. The Land Transportation, Franchising, and Regulatory Board is expected to issue its recommendation on a fare increase within the week.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service can be heard over the following shortwave frequencies: 12.020 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.665 MHz. Radyo Pilipinas World Service is also live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our posts as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
from the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.